world confronted today, COVID-19. And also I'm very much thankful to the organizer, seeing now already 53 participants, giant theologians from Myanmar and across the world. I am a little bit puzzled whether my presentation will be relevant or not. But my focus is to raise some theological issues so that we challenge each other and then look forward a new future in doing contextual theology. I have prepared a short PowerPoint presentation and I will share that one. Permitting me to share. And then please mute. Some of you have not muted so that our voice can be audibly heard by others. Okay, the focus is ministerial, in fact, also theological challenges in the context of COVID-19. We have confronted with a mysterious virus. Still, the whole world do not know, and we have not found the cure. First time in the world, the whole world got locked down. Nobody, could challenge before to lockdown, even the world war. But this virus, unknown, mysterious virus, have locked down. It has affected 239 countries and territories. Still, unstoppable outbreak. Only 11 countries and territories are not reported. Small countries, see, in the Pacific Islands. It was pandemic in the beginning. Today, it is epidemic because it covers the whole world. And it is going to be endemic. That means it will stay with us for many, many years. Expert predicted that COVID will not leave us. But we just have to learn how to live with it. 70 research groups worldwide are working for remedy, but concrete result is yet to be seen. It is going to make a long-term impact, especially on the poor. This is the focus. On the poor, going to make a long-term impact. So my presentation is divided into 7 subsections. What are the issues and challenges emerging from the COVID-19? How did the lockdown, migration, created humanitarian crisis, and how do we respond? How it has created food crisis among the poor, while some rich people have more richer and more abundant. How ecological crisis interconnected with the COVID-19 issue, and what is our theological response? We also have been facing in a pandemic of racial discrimination all over the world. How do we respond to this kind of racial discrimination? Now we have introduced online education and how it's going to impact on the poor and what will be our response. So the church's response and the future indigenous theology, some direction I would like to share in this morning presentation. Lockdown and its impact on the coming months already started. More antisocial robberies, daylight robberies are increasing because people don't have food. Can we return to normal activities? We don't know. How to handle the returnees, immigrants, They are with us. What about their livelihood? Will they be able to go back to their workplace? Or do you want them to go back and suffer? What about the education system, especially in the rural places, in the poor families? What about the worship services? What is the future of full-time Christian ministers? Without worship service, will you get salary? What kind of ministry now do we need? Will online pastoral care through telephone, home visitation will sustain our congregation spiritually? We need to think aloud. What does novel coronavirus affect? How does this COVID-19 affect vulnerable community, indigenous community? And how do we get out from this effect? How, in what way the churches are responding? Especially, how shall we respond to post-COVID-19? How do we challenge corruption in injustice, unjust economic system that perpetuate more suffering than the COVID? What does COVID-19 challenge in Christian faith practice, Christian theology, especially indigenous theology? What is the role of the teacher in church leaders? These are some of the questions that we need to grapple with. I don't have a ready-made answer, but it is common a concern that we all have to think seriously on these issues. Lockdown, migration, humanitarian crisis. How much people have to rush to go back to their countries? See the crisis that the people face. All country lockdown for months. Now it is 8-9 months now. All the school, offices, business establishment, restaurant, flight, rails, buses, sports, religious catering, all locked down. We are forced to live with masks, sanitizer, maintain social distancing, and stay home. We have to work from home, conduct classes from home, organize seminar and conferences like today. Even examination has now going online. Do shopping from home, banking from home, and all this. A smartphone has emerged as a savior. Approximately 164 million migrant workers globally. After the outbreak, followed by lockdown, millions of people have went back to their respective country, but still some are stranded, especially from smaller countries. There's no flight. You see some Taiwan people in the group, they cannot come back, no flight. We do not know how many are still stranded. Imagine if you are one of them without money, or if your daughter is stranded, what will you think? It is painful to read a story from India, Jaya Kumari. She's just 15 years old, but she dared to take her father home on a bicycle. They were evicted from the room where they live in India. The father, who had the broken leg, was seated on a carrier of an old bicycle, and she pedaled him all the way to the home village in Bihar. The journey took 7 days. The distance cover was around 1,000 miles. Some echo is there. This story is a story of migrant workers all over the world. People have to walk hundreds of miles home in terrible heat, rain, and with little food sustenance. We have witnessed such humanitarian crises all over the world, and I was reading Myanmar, Thailand border where they have faced many crises. Some people, please switch up your unmute. Myanmar is one of the safest country in terms of COVID-19. Myanmar has handled very well compared to some advanced countries. I was checking on 18 August, see globally infected 22,334,964. Myanmar has only 368. Death is more than 7 lakhs. Myanmar only 7. So in terms of the COVID, Myanmar has done much better. Though Myanmar does not have high number of COVID infection, Myanmar has affected severely due to high number of migrant workers abroad and also many people in poverty. According to ILO report, over 4 million Myanmar migrant workers in the world, out of which about 2 million in Thailand. Majority of them are ethnic minorities who left the country due to poverty, political violence, oppression, and exploitation. Many of them work in informal work, casual in daily wages. Even many skilled workers are on casual work because they don't have job. They have to do whatever they can. Many families at home depend on their support. So their loss of job means crisis, economic crisis at home. Migrant workers, again, going back without income, intensified poverty and suffering at home. Humanitarian crisis further triggered, in Thailand, I have mentioned when they closed the border. Many are trapped without job. Not only in Thailand, thousands of people have returned from different countries to Myanmar. The returnees are in about 7,000 quarantine facilities across the country. This is additional burden to the people of Myanmar as the country has many IDP in many hundreds of IDP camps in the country. It is reported that majority of the affected people are poor ethnic minorities. It means COVID-19 has added extra pain and suffering to already vulnerable community. COVID-19 has exposed the condition of workers. We have seen even in the US, in one small room, 8-9 people living. No insurance. And they face harassment from police, from the owner, every day. And sometimes some are not paid. Due to lack of adequate food, more disease. All kinds of, problem has faced by the migrant workers. These are the problem, crisis. Lockdown added more burden again to women. 82% of the global domestic force are women. Due to loss of job of the middle class employers, many domestic workers have lost their job. Some even got infected while taking care of the senior citizens. Lockdown increased. Others are giving rest, taking rest, but for the domestic worker, no rest. Every day, 24 hours, they have to work. Migrant workers, especially those on the temporary visa, have badly affected. They don't know about their future. Undocumented stateless migrant workers are again more seriously affected, as the fear and anxiety raise, some have committed suicide. We have many stories of landlords forcing their tenants to vacate their rent. Being exhausted, many people died while returning home. There are many nightmare stories of struggle for food, water, and shelter at night. Quite a few children and elderly died on the way. Some women gave birth on the way. Some women were even raped. Now, the returnees are in different states, districts. They need food, home, and job to earn their living. Some of them do not have land to cultivate. Being driven by poverty, there's the increase of substance abuse, robbery, social unrest, and commercial sex. There are also instances of parents letting their minor daughter. I was reading news that 50 years old man got married with 15 years girl, and that was forced by the parents because of the poverty, hunger. Resettlement required long-term intervention. What steps should we take to address the issue? Is charity work that we are doing now by the churches? We need, is it enough? We need a theology of justice, equality, and solidarity on the long-term basis to address this issue. Food crisis is another issue. The hunger virus killed about 8,000 children a day, and the vaccine exists. It is school food, but you won't hear that in media. Do you know why? Because hunger does not kill the rich. 26 richest white men own as much as 50% of the world wealth. Terribly unjust. Government says that we have enough food, but poor people are dying. Poverty is a major cause of spreading COVID-19 in the poor countries, including in the rich country like US, because most of the infected people are black and migrant workers. The gap between the rich and poor is further widened. And I was reading a news that 12% increase in the wealth of the very rich people. 12% increase. But in contrast, 11% fall in the wealth of the poorest, half of the world population. COVID is now a lucrative business for the pharmaceutical industry, for the corporates, because they can extract the money in the name of COVID. It is said that if the present pandemic continues for another year, 183 million poor will experience famine in Africa and Asia. For example, so many poor people are there dying of lack of food. I give you some example, but I'm sure this will be the same in Myanmar. It is estimated that 3% of the global population hold 25% of the wealth. It's totally an unjust economic relation. It is said that in American 815 billion calories of food each year, that is roughly 2 billion more than needed, enough to feed 80 million people. Americans throw away 200,000 tons of edible food daily, while more than 20 million people do not have enough food to eat, while the 2 billion people are overweight or obese because they have eaten too much. when people are dying because of unjust system and exploitation. One person have taken over everything. I give example of a millionaire in India, Ambani. Daughter got married in December 2018, and he spent 70 crores. And for 10 days, he chartered 200 flights. One millionaire chartered a A320 airplane by 18 lakhs. For her daughter, 2 sons and 7, only 4 of them from Bhopal to Delhi during the lockdown. Some people don't know where to spend the money. This is the situation now. The rich are not affected economically by COVID. They can buy in store, but the poor do not have luxury of buying a refrigerator to store a week worth of groceries. When the poor die of hunger, the rich man is more worried about your dog. I have a friend nearby here. He's giving a servant specifically to look after his 2 dogs. Dogs sleep in air condition. When poor people die of heat wave, some owners observe even dog's birthday. Some people mourn when dog die, but they don't mourn, they don't visit, they don't cry when human being die of hunger in their neighborhood. Out of 24.9 million people trafficked in forced labor, 16 million people are exploited in the private sectors, such as domestic work, construction or agriculture work, or many in the sex work. And all this are from the poor country like India, Myanmar, Nepal, Bangladesh, and so on. UN General Secretary, what he said is right. It is unacceptable that hunger is on the rise at a time when the world wastes more than 1 billion tons of food every year. Monopolization of production, distribution is causing so much of suffering in the world. We cannot preach good news without challenging the global, local, unjust economic system. Do we address food pandemic in our theological education system? Do we need a theology of food securities? And I believe no liberation theology without speaking about food security. We have to do something on the food security locally, nationally, and globally. We also have different kinds of diseases confronted by the ecological climate change. Throughout human history, we have seen many diseases, epidemic, and now we are facing this one, coronavirus, and this has a close relationship with ecological imbalance. Different viruses outbreak is due to ecological imbalance. In novel coronavirus was dormant. It was already there even in the past, but it surfaces adapting to new ecological context. It is related to respiratory problem because so much of pollution and then overpopulation in the city. 90% of the COVID infection are from the cities, and then massive pollution means death. I was reading about the automobile, each year 73 million automobiles on the road every year. In 2005, total of 1 billion cars on the road. By 2020, vehicle population will cross 2 billion. and by 2025, 2.5 billion. Consumption of oil reaches 83 million barrels per day in 2016. So now it will be almost 100, and it is expected to be 120 billion barrels per day in 2030. US population comprises of 2.25 of the world population, but they consume almost 20% of the world petroleum product. See, pollution. This is our city. This is our industry and how it pollutes. So we need a theology that affirms the centrality of land and creation. This is very critical for us. Community transformation over individual freedom, over individual transformation. Relationality or interconnection between all living beings, even inanimate objects such as rock, animal, river, mountain, all this. We need to rediscover how to live in balanced, interconnected life. Simple, functional life than over luxury. A respectful and reciprocal attitude in use of natural resources is very much needed. Sharing over accumulation of wealth. Sharing. We need to develop a theology of sharing, but not a theology of accumulation. Alternative definition of privilege, power, and prestige, and promote people's-oriented development in management of resources. And also we have seen pandemic of racial discrimination. We have seen the gruesome murder of George Floyd in US. This is just one episode, but black, indigenous people, and racial minorities have been facing discrimination both individually and collectively for many, many centuries. Human Rights Council, Elizabeth, he said that it is not just one isolated killing in one country, but it goes beyond, and it is a critical, universal concern needs to be addressed seriously. Black Lives Matter movement has drawn the attention that racism is to be declared as sin in inhuman practices. Racism is deeply rooted in the white mindset, of course, even in some of us. Black and Asians are now facing two pandemics, COVID and racism. They face hate speech in the street, elevator, neighborhood, marketplaces, and so on. In a France television news broadcast, we have already seen the COVID vaccine should be tested in Africa, where there is no mask, no treatment, no resuscitation. That's a very racial remark. The President Trump still continue to call Chinese virus Kung flu in press briefing in rallies. It is not only in US but Asian experience, hate speeches in Australia, Europe, and Canada. The scale of abuse on social media sites is even more serious, with thousands of derogatory and abusive comments reported. So, so many, abuses, more than 20,000 incidences that happened just in the US. Asians are now who have been living for second, third generation are asked to go back to China, go back to wherever Asian country you belong to. You started Corona, China man, You need to go home. This F virus came from your mother country. You nasty cockroach. Take your disease that is running in your country. In the US, Naga was also asked to go back to China. Very interesting. This is the attitude. And if you are called like that in a foreign country, when you are a minority, what will you feel? COVID-19 pandemic is exposing the deep divisions, injustice, and inequalities in our society on the basis of race. Many Asians have abused, attacked, and many continue to live in fear of being attacked due to surge of racism against Asian. COVID-19 has exposed how racism is deeply rooted and has potential to create violence and divide the people on the basis of race and color. Christian teaching of love, care, universal brotherhood, sisterhood is just skin deep even today, even among the Christian, in spite of many teaching. COVID-19 exposes especially the failure of theologian, church leader who have not taught how to love each other, respect each other. The gospel of Jesus transcends all racial barrier. We need to realize that those who attack on the basis of color, race are striking against God who created all human beings in the image of God. There is a divine presence in each person, not only in the white. They are created by God, and that demands respect, their dignity, integrity, regardless of color, ethnicity, national origin, or social status. Following Jesus, indigenous theology should transcend our narrow nationalism, regionalism, tribalism, and protectionism. God's love diversity. It is a blessing to humanity. In diversity, we discover God's richness. Exclusive attitude towards other races is dangerous. Recognition of God's active presence in all life and respecting and upholding the value of respect, openness, solidarity, caring, and loving for others are the foundation of peaceful existence. I'm about to finish. Am I exceeded the time? Smartphone has emerged as our savior. I have already told you. There is a serious digital divide between urban rural and rich poor. Many rich and urban dwellers have welcomed online education as a blessing, but it creates a serious crisis among the rural poor. Those who cannot afford smartphone and computer cannot attend class. The poor, those who are living in the, especially in the village, the poor are badly affected on online classes. How do we expect people living in the rural places do well? How can they perform well in the competitive exam? Because you can get a job only through the competitive exam. The present online education system, if it continues, will further enslave poor, ethnic minorities, and the rural masses. Not only network issue, but frequent power supply interruption is a problem, and that is very much experienced in Myanmar. In some places, poor people have to travel towards the mountainside or where network is available just to attend the class. Unable to cope with the pressure, some even got committed suicide. In Assam, one young boy committed suicide because his parents could not afford smartphone, he could not attend the class, he could not attend the unit test, so he committed suicide. Just near our place, one student, brilliant girl, committed suicide because no smartphone. He was excelling in the class, but after online education started, he could not because he cannot afford. That is the situation. We need to search an alternative skill-oriented model of education to ensure economic justice and rights, jobs, liberate the poor from poverty, land rights, development, dependency, identity in culture preservation, and transformation of the rural community is being suppressed. Theological education also need to reformulate in the light of live like a slave there in other country. Why do we suffer from lack of job and opportunities in our own places where we have plenty of land, water, air? Why do we have to suffer? Why do we go to pretty job like domestic work, to work in the parlors, massage parlor in the city, live lonely, homesick? How long our indigenous sisters and brothers from the hill will migrate for bread and butter in the cities? Can we go on like this? Why not? We do something concrete. COVID-19 has intensified exclusion, denial, stigmatization. How shall we respond? Rich can recover very fast, but vulnerable community, it will take a long years. What steps should be taken for the vulnerable community who are created in God's image? Our church, we have stood for the poor and excluded for centuries. Now, what are the new long-term strategies to help the poor? Our support was mainly charitable. Now, long-term strategy to liberate the poor. COVID-19 has created opportunity for the churches to live out its prophetic calling. It is important. It is an opportune time to be awakened and proactive in the issues of corruption, inequalities, and injustice in our countries and state. I have written 30 articles in daily newspaper challenging the government and church in the context of COVID-19, and then that was well received. I was so much encouraged. Open hospital, medical colleges. Why not? For this, one single church cannot do, but should strategize to work together. The churches initiated many relief work, free food, rest house, medical